The night was silent until Emma screamed, her voice breaking through the air like glass shattering. She clutched her son Daniel tightly, his small arms circling her waist, as if holding back the storm. The apartment shook when Mark slammed the door, the echo crawling into every corner. Sirens wailed faintly outside, reminding her that chaos always lived near. Emma's breath came sharp, her chest tightening as she whispered, "We'll be safe, I promise." But even as the words left her lips, doubt gnawed at her. Mark's face, twisted with rage, lingered in her mind. Daniel's wide eyes reflected fear too grown for a boy his age. Emma wanted to cry, but instead she kissed his hair and closed her eyes. The night felt endless, shadows stretching across walls, reminding her of every scar the past left behind. Betrayal burned in her chest, louder than the sirens. She whispered again, more to herself than to Daniel, "No one will take you from me." But deep inside, she knew the fight had just begun. Emma stood frozen in the silence after the storm, her body stiff as though every nerve screamed to move, yet chained her still. Daniel whispered, "Mom, is he coming back?" The words cut her deeper than Mark's anger ever could. She stroked his hair, steadying her voice, "No, baby, not tonight." But inside she wondered if she truly believed that. The apartment felt hollow, echoes of the slammed door mocking her resolve. She wanted to scream, to rage, but Daniel's trembling hands anchored her. The sirens faded in the distance, leaving nothing but her shallow breaths and the pounding of her heart. Emma forced herself to kneel, to meet his eyes, whispering, "You're safe with me." The promise felt fragile, almost like glass she feared would shatter with the slightest pressure. Yet she knew she had no choice. This was her war now, and Daniel was the only reason she would survive it. Daniel finally let out a shaky breath, his small body sinking against her shoulder as if surrendering to exhaustion. Emma carried him to the couch, each step heavy with the weight of responsibility. She lowered him gently, tucking a blanket around him. For a moment, she let herself pause, watching his chest rise and fall, his lashes damp from tears. She whispered, "I'll keep you safe." But the words felt like prayers, fragile against the unknown. Her mind replayed Mark's face, twisted with betrayal, and the sound of the door slamming replayed like a curse. She wiped her eyes quickly, not allowing weakness to linger. Sitting on the floor beside the couch, she rested her forehead against Daniel's hand, whispering promises only she could hear. The night wrapped around her, oppressive and suffocating, but she refused to give in. Her battle had only begun, and she would not let fear decide their fate. The apartment clock ticked loud in the silence, each second a reminder of time slipping away. Emma stared at the shadows, her mind racing through unanswered questions. How would she keep Daniel safe if Mark returned? How would she afford lawyers, rent, food, all while fighting alone? The weight of sacrifice pressed harder, but beneath it burned a flicker of resolve. Daniel stirred in his sleep, murmuring softly, pulling her focus back to him. She brushed his hair aside gently, whispering, "I've got you, baby." The words felt steadier this time, almost believable. She glanced toward the locked door, her heart tightening, but she lifted her chin, her jaw firm. She was tired of running from her past. No more hiding, no more silence. Tonight had shown her how fragile life could be. Now she knew. It was time to fight back, no matter the cost. Emma rose slowly, her body stiff but her heart steadying into rhythm. She walked to the kitchen, every step deliberate, her bare feet against the cold tiles grounding her. Opening the window, she inhaled the night air, sharp and wet with rain. It cooled the heat burning in her chest. She whispered to the darkness, "You won't break us." Her reflection in the glass caught her gaze, tired eyes staring back, but something new flickered there, defiance. She turned back to Daniel, asleep on the couch, and for the first time in years, she felt something stronger than fear. The night was not her enemy anymore. It was her witness. The silence wasn't empty. It was her call to arms. She pressed her hand against her chest, whispering once more, "We fight tomorrow." And for the first time since the door slammed, she believed her own words. Morning came like a thief, pulling Emma from restless sleep into a reality she could not escape. Daniel stirred beside her on the couch, his small body curled beneath the blanket, innocence etched across his face. She whispered, "Time to get ready, sweetheart," though her voice cracked under the weight of fatigue. Every movement felt heavier than the night before, but routine demanded she push forward. She dressed him quickly, packing his worn backpack with quiet efficiency. The silence pressed hard, broken only by Daniel's soft yawns. She tried to smile for him, hiding the storm raging inside. As she tied his shoes, her hands shook slightly, but Daniel didn't notice. "Today will be better," she murmured, though doubt lingered behind her words. In the mirror, she saw dark circles under her eyes, the face of a woman carrying more than anyone should. She straightened, kissed his forehead, and walked him to the door. The walk to school was quiet, footsteps echoing on the damp pavement. Daniel clung to Emma's hand, his grip tighter than usual. She forced a smile, whispering, "You'll be fine today, I promise." He nodded but said nothing, eyes scanning the ground. Passing neighbors offered polite nods, unaware of the storm beneath her calm exterior. Emma's mind raced, already calculating bills, groceries, and the looming threat of custody battles. She squeezed Daniel's hand harder, grounding herself in his presence. At the school gate, he hesitated, glancing back at her. "You'll be here after, right?" he asked, his voice soft but loaded with fear. Emma knelt, steadying her gaze into his. "Always," she whispered. He smiled faintly, gave a small nod, and disappeared inside. She stood alone for a moment, her chest tightening with both pride and dread. Then, shoulders squared, she turned back toward the fight waiting for her. Emma walked briskly to the bus stop, the weight of silence pressing against her as the city stirred awake. The crowd around her seemed distant, strangers wrapped in their own worlds. She replayed last night in her mind. The slammed door, the sirens, the way Daniel's eyes mirrored her pain. Fear clung to her like a shadow, but anger sparked beneath it, whispering she could not let this break her. The bus arrived, screeching against the wet road. She stepped inside, clutching her bag tightly. As the ride began, she stared out the window, the city blurring past. Every stop reminded her of responsibilities stacked like bricks against her shoulders. Rent, work, lawyers, survival, each one heavy. Yet, beneath the noise of doubt, a voice grew louder. "You're stronger than this," she told herself quietly, almost believing it. She pressed her forehead against the glass, breathing deeply, preparing for battle. At the office, Emma forced a smile as she stepped inside, though her co-workers barely noticed her arrival. Papers piled high on her desk, the phone ringing before she even sat down. Her manager's voice cut sharp, reminding her of missed deadlines and rising expectations. She swallowed hard, answering with quiet professionalism, hiding the storm inside. The hours dragged heavy, every task like climbing a mountain with no summit in sight. She thought of Daniel at school, wondering if he felt safe, if he still worried she wouldn't return. The clock ticked louder, each second amplifying her exhaustion. Then came the email, a subtle threat from Mark's lawyer, words sharpened into knives. Her hands trembled as she read it, bile rising in her throat. But instead of breaking, she closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and whispered to herself, "Not today." She straightened her back, burying fear beneath fragile resolve. The day ended with Emma walking home beneath a heavy sky, clouds pressing low as though mirroring her thoughts. The streets were quiet, neon signs flickering in the distance. She hugged her coat tighter, bracing against the chill. Every step home felt heavier, dread curling in her stomach about what she might find. Another confrontation, another reminder of battles looming. She thought of Daniel's smile that morning, the way he asked if she'd be there. That promise kept her moving. At the apartment door, her keys shook slightly in her hand, but she forced steadiness. Inside, silence greeted her, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Daniel's laughter floated faintly from his room, and for a brief moment the world softened. Emma leaned against the door, tears pricking her eyes. She whispered, "We'll make it through." It was both a prayer and a vow spoken to the night. Emma's heart pounded as she sat across from her lawyer in a cramped office, papers stacked high between them. The smell of coffee lingered, but it couldn't mask the sharp sting of dread. Her lawyer's words were blunt. Mark is pushing for custody. The sentence burned like fire. She gripped the armrest, whispering, "He can't take Daniel from me." The lawyer sighed, pointing to the papers. "He'll fight dirty. You must be ready." Emma's stomach twisted. The thought of Daniel pulled from her arms unbearable. She thought of his laughter, his small hand gripping hers, the promises she whispered every night. Her pulse raced, but beneath the panic, steel began to form. She said quietly, "Then I'll fight too." Her lawyer's expression softened, nodding, though the weight of the challenge hung thick in the air. Emma left with trembling legs, yet a fire ignited deep inside her chest. That night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the echo of her lawyer's words replaying endlessly. Daniel slept beside her, his small breath steady, anchoring her to the present. She turned toward him, brushing his hair back gently. "I won't let him take you," she whispered, though her voice trembled. Memories of Mark's anger crashed into her thoughts, his voice calling her unfit, his threats cutting deeper than knives. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to cry. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling the frantic rhythm of her heart, as if reminding herself she was still alive, still fighting. She pictured the courtroom, imagined standing tall despite fear gnawing at her. She thought of every sacrifice, every night worked late, every moment she chose Daniel over herself. "They'll see," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm enough." And for a moment, she believed it. The next day at work, Emma's phone buzzed with a new message. She froze, dread filling her chest before she even opened it. The text was from Mark. "You'll lose him, just accept it." Her breath caught, her fingers tightening around the phone. Anger flared hot, pushing against the fear. She whispered, "Never." Her coworker glanced at her, oblivious to the storm inside. She turned back to her computer, forcing herself to focus. But her thoughts spun like a storm, replaying Mark's cruelty, the way he twisted everything to wound her. She clenched her jaw, fighting back the rising panic. Daniel's face flashed in her mind, his trust, his innocence. That vision became her anchor. She typed furiously on her keyboard, the clatter masking the pounding of her heart. For the first time, she didn't just feel cornered. She felt ready to fight back. Later that evening, Emma met her best friend Sarah at a quiet cafe. Sarah's eyes widened as Emma spilled everything: the lawyer, the threats, the fear. Sarah reached across the table, gripping her hand firmly. "You're stronger than this," she said with conviction. Emma wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at her insides. "What if I lose him?" she whispered, voice cracking. Sarah leaned closer, her tone fierce. "Then you fight until you can't breathe, because Daniel needs you." Emma felt tears threatening but blinked them back, squeezing Sarah's hand. The warmth of her friend's support cut through the icy fear. For the first time in days, she didn't feel alone. She managed a faint smile, whispering, "Thank you." Sarah nodded, eyes softening. "You've carried everything alone too long. Let me help." The words settled over Emma like a fragile shield of hope. Walking home from the cafe, Emma pulled her coat tight against the chill night air. For the first time, she felt the faint stirrings of strength beneath the fear. Sarah's words echoed, steadying her. Passing under dim streetlights, she whispered to herself, "I will not lose." Thought carried weight, not as a dream but as a vow. Her steps grew firmer, her pace quicker. The city noise surrounded her, cars passing, voices in the distance, yet she felt strangely centered. Each stride carried her closer to the apartment, closer to Daniel, closer to the fight that awaited. At the door she paused, looking up at the dark windows. She inhaled deeply, bracing for tomorrow. Her hand shook slightly on the key, but she steadied it, whispering, "This ends with me." Inside, Daniel's soft laughter carried down the hall. That sound was her answer, her reason, her fuel. The apartment was quiet, but Emma's heart beat violently as she rifled through an envelope left in her mailbox. Inside were photographs, Daniel at school, Emma leaving work, even her walking alone at night. Her hands trembled as she stared at the images, bile rising in her throat. Someone had been watching them, documenting their lives like prey. She whispered, "How long?" Fear clawed at her ribs, but rage flared stronger. This wasn't just Mark anymore. This was something deeper, darker. She shoved the pictures back into the envelope and sank onto the couch, breath shallow. Daniel called from his room, his innocent voice slicing through the terror. Emma forced a steady tone. "I'm coming, baby." She hid the envelope under the couch, her mind spinning. Betrayal's stench clung to her walls. Whoever had done this had crossed a line, and Emma knew she couldn't run from the past anymore. Emma sat with Sarah at the cafe again, her hands shaking as she laid the photographs across the table. Sarah's face darkened, her lips pressed tight as she whispered, "Emma, this isn't just Mark." Emma nodded, eyes brimming with tears she refused to shed. "I don't know who else it could be." Sarah leaned forward, voice urgent. "You have to go to the police." Emma shook her head, fear pounding harder. "What if they think I'm unfit? What if this ruins custody?" The words tumbled out, raw and desperate. Sarah's hand squeezed hers, eyes filled with fierce loyalty. "You can't protect Daniel alone if someone is stalking you." Emma looked down at the photos, her reflection fractured across the glossy paper. Secrets pressed against her, threatening to bury her alive. She whispered, "I thought betrayal couldn't surprise me anymore, but it still does." Back home, Emma locked the door, pressing her back against it as if holding the world outside. She opened the envelope again, laying the photos on the table, staring at them one by one. Some were weeks old, others from yesterday. Daniel smiling in the schoolyard, Emma talking to Sarah, even moments when she thought she was completely alone. A chill crept over her skin, the walls closing in. She muttered, "Why? Us." Her mind spiraled to every enemy, every burned bridge, every mistake she tried to bury. The past she'd locked away was clawing its way back. Daniel padded into the room in pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Mom?" he asked softly. Emma shoved the photos aside, forcing a smile. "Go back to bed, sweetheart." She hugged him briefly, inhaling his innocence, then walked him back to his room. "Alone again," she whispered. "This isn't over." The next day, Emma stood outside the courthouse, clutching her bag with white knuckles. Mark leaned against the steps, smirking when he saw her. "You look tired," he said, his voice dripping with cruelty. Emma's stomach knotted, but she forced her gaze steady. "You won't win." His smirk deepened. "I already have people on my side. You're just one woman with too many secrets." The words sliced deeper than he knew. Emma wanted to scream, to expose the photographs, but fear locked her throat. Instead, she turned sharply, walking inside, refusing to give him the satisfaction. Each step echoed like defiance. Inside, the courthouse buzzed with voices, papers, gavel strikes. Emma sat on the bench, breath shallow, praying for strength. Betrayal circled her like vultures, but she whispered into the noise, "I'm not breaking." That night, Emma opened a drawer she hadn't touched in years. Inside lay an old photograph, her estranged brother James, smiling beside her younger self. She hadn't spoken to him in over a decade, their bond fractured by betrayal she never forgave. Yet now, with shadows circling her life, she felt him like a ghost at her side. She whispered, "Where are you?" Her hands trembled as she traced the edges of the photo, her mind torn between anger and longing. Memories flooded back. The laughter, the arguments, the day he disappeared from her life. She had buried him in silence, but silence no longer felt safe. For the first time, she wondered if he was the missing piece, the ally she never expected. She pressed the photograph to her chest, whispering into the night, "Maybe it's time." Emma waited nervously in the cafe, her heart hammering against her ribs. The door opened, and James walked in. Older, sharper, but undeniably him. Their eyes locked, silence heavy with years of absence. He approached slowly, voice low. "It's been a long time." Emma's throat tightened. Too long. She wanted to hate him, to scream, but all she felt was a fragile relief. He slid into the booth, eyes scanning her face. "You're in trouble," he said, matter of fact. Emma bristled. "How would you know?" James leaned closer, voice firm. "Because I've been watching, waiting." Her stomach twisted. "You?" He nodded, shame flickering in his eyes. "I never stopped protecting you." Betrayal and gratitude warred inside her, but Daniel's face rose in her mind. She whispered, "If you're really here to help, then prove it." Their conversation unspooled like a wound reopening. James confessed quietly about the people who had followed her, the photographs, the danger she had unknowingly lived under. Emma's hands shook as she listened, every word like a shard of glass cutting deeper. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she demanded. His eyes lowered, shame heavy. "Because I thought I could keep it away from you. But now, it's bigger." Rage surged in her chest, colliding with fear. She whispered, "You left me when I needed you most." His jaw tightened. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." Emma's mind spun with betrayal, but also with the possibility of an ally. For the first time, the enemy felt larger than Mark. The past and present had collided, and survival meant choosing whether to forgive. That evening, Emma sat with Daniel on the couch, his laughter echoing as he played with toy cars. She forced a smile, but her mind spun with James' revelations. The world felt darker, more dangerous, but also less lonely. Daniel tugged her sleeve, his innocent voice anchoring her. "Mom, are you okay?" She pulled him close, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I am now," she whispered, though fear lingered in her chest. James' shadow hovered in her mind, the promise of protection, the pain of his past betrayal. She didn't know if she could trust him, but Daniel's safety demanded she try. Looking at her son smile, Emma knew she couldn't afford weakness. The storm was far from over, but now she wasn't facing it alone. For the first time, she let a flicker of hope in. Emma met James again the next night, this time in a quiet parking lot. The air was sharp with winter chill, their breaths fogging between them. James handed her a folder, papers inside revealing names, dates, connections to Mark she never imagined. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the evidence, each page cutting deeper into betrayal. "He's not just fighting for Daniel," James said grimly. "He's trying to ruin you completely." Emma swallowed hard, fury bubbling beneath her fear. "Then I'll burn everything he throws at me." James' eyes flickered with pride. "That's the sister I remember." Emma closed the folder, her resolve hardening. The past had broken them once, but tonight it bound them together. She whispered into the frozen air, "Hell, regret underestimating me." Back home, Emma stood at Daniel's bedroom door, watching him sleep peacefully, his small body curled beneath the blankets. She pressed her hand against the frame, her heart aching with love and fear. Behind her, the folder James gave her sat on the table, its truths burning like fire. She whispered to herself, "This ends with me." The quiet of the night wrapped around her, but for the first time, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt like preparation, a calm before war. She knew Mark would strike harder, but she was no longer just defending. She was ready to fight back. Emma closed Daniel's door softly, walking into the shadows of the living room. Her reflection in the darkened window stared back, weary but unbroken. She whispered one final promise into the silence, "We're going to win." The courtroom smelled of polished wood and nerves. Emma sat stiffly, her palms damp, Daniel's photograph tucked inside her bag like armor. Mark strode in with his lawyer, exuding smug confidence. She avoided his gaze, focusing instead on the judge entering with solemn authority. The bailiff called for order, and suddenly, silence pressed heavy. Emma's lawyer leaned close, whispering, "Stay calm. Speak from truth." She nodded, swallowing hard. Across the room, Mark smirked, his eyes burning with triumph. Every bone in her body screamed to scream, but she held still. This was no place for fury. This was war fought with restraint. The judge's gavel struck, and the sound cracked like thunder in Emma's chest. Her hands tightened on the table, whispering silently to herself, "I won't lose him." Her fear burned away, leaving only determination. Mark's lawyer rose, his voice slick with arrogance, painting Emma as unstable, overwhelmed, incapable of providing. Every word sliced into her like a blade, but she sat still, fists clenched in her lap. He spoke of her long hours at work, her exhaustion, even hinted at her loneliness as weakness. Emma bit her tongue, rage coiling deep, waiting for her turn. Mark leaned back, smirking, basking in the venom. Her lawyer finally stood, voice calm but firm, countering each accusation with truth. Her dedication, her sacrifice, her love. Emma's throat tightened with emotion as her own life was laid bare in cold detail. Then the judge turned to her. "Name's Carter," he said. "You may speak." Her heart thudded so loudly she could hear nothing else. She rose slowly, every step toward the stand a choice between despair and courage. She whispered inwardly, "For Daniel." Emma gripped the edge of the witness stand, forcing her voice steady. She spoke of sacrifice, of nights working double shifts to keep Daniel fed, of mornings she stitched together courage with coffee and prayer. Her eyes shone as she described Daniel's laugh, his strength, his innocence. "I'm not perfect," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I have never stopped fighting for him. He is my life." The courtroom grew still, her words echoing into the silence. Mark scoffed audibly, but Emma didn't waver. The judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Emma continued, heart hammering, "Every scar I carry is proof of my fight to protect him, and I will not stop now." Her lawyer nodded faintly, pride flickering. As Emma's voice cracked with emotion, the room felt suspended, her truth a weapon sharper than any accusation. Mark took the stand next, his words dripping venom. He painted himself as the stable parent, the reliable one, twisting stories into knives aimed at Emma's heart. "She's emotional, reckless, unfit," he said with a practiced tone. Emma's nails dug into her palms, her lawyer whispering, "Stay calm." But inside, her fury roared. Then came the cross-examination. Her lawyer pressing, cornering, peeling back Mark's facade. With each question, cracks appeared. His voice faltered when asked about missed child support, his eyes shifted when confronted with evidence. Emma's breath caught as the truth began to surface. For years, he had painted her as the failure, but here under oath, his lies began to crumble. Emma held Daniel's photograph inside her bag, fingers brushing it like a talisman. For the first time, she felt the balance shift. The day's hearing ended with tension thick enough to choke on. The judge dismissed the room, promising a decision soon. Emma walked outside into cold air, her legs trembling from hours of holding herself together. Mark brushed past, muttering, "This isn't over." She ignored him, her eyes fixed ahead. Sarah was waiting on the steps, arms open. Emma collapsed into her embrace, her body shaking with exhaustion and relief. "You did it," Sarah whispered fiercely. Emma pulled back, her face streaked with tears but alight with fire. "No," she said firmly. "We're not done yet. But I'm ready." Behind them, the courthouse loomed, a fortress of judgment, but Emma no longer felt small beneath it. For the first time in years she felt powerful. She had spoken her truth, and it had pierced the silence. The verdict day arrived. Emma's heart pounded as the judge spoke, his voice echoing in her bones. "Custody granted to Miss Carter." The words washed over her like a tidal wave. She gasped softly, her hand clutching her chest. Mark's face contorted with rage, but she no longer cared. Tears blurred her vision as she thought of Daniel, his smile, his trust. The judge continued with final notes, but Emma barely heard him. She reached for her lawyer's hand, whispering, "Thank you." Relief and exhaustion battled inside her body, every muscle trembling. The gavel struck, sealing her fate. Victory wasn't triumphant fireworks. It was quiet, trembling breaths in a courtroom filled with ghosts of her past. She whispered to herself, "We did it." For once, the words didn't feel fragile. They felt real. Outside the courthouse, Emma embraced Daniel tightly, his small arms wrapping around her neck with trust and joy. "We're okay now," she whispered, her voice breaking. He smiled, eyes wide with relief. Sarah stood nearby, tears glistening as she clapped softly. James lingered in the distance, his expression unreadable but proud. Emma pulled back to study Daniel's face, memorizing every detail, every breath of safety. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "We are free." Yet even in victory, shadows lingered. She knew the scars would remain: betrayal, fear, the nights she thought she'd break. But Daniel's laughter rose like sunlight through storm clouds, anchoring her to the present. For the first time, hope didn't feel like a lie. It felt like a future. That evening, Emma sat at her kitchen table, the apartment finally quiet. The folder James had given her lay unopened now, no longer needed for survival. She stared at it, then pushed it aside, choosing not to let the past define her any longer. Daniel's laughter echoed from his room, pure and bright, pulling her out of the haze. She whispered, "This is what matters." She walked to his door, pausing to watch him play. He looked up, grinning, and she smiled back. A real, unforced smile that felt foreign and beautiful. For years she carried pain like a second skin. Tonight, she shed some of it. Not all, but enough. The air no longer suffocated. It carried promise. She pressed her palm against the doorway, whispering softly, "We made it." Later, Emma stood at the window, city lights flickering beyond the glass. Her reflection stared back, weary but alive, broken yet unbowed. She thought of every tear, every sleepless night, every betrayal she endured. They hadn't destroyed her. They had carved her into someone stronger. James' words lingered in her mind, Sarah's support wrapped around her like a blanket, Daniel's laughter filling her soul. She whispered to the reflection, "You did it." It wasn't pride, not fully, but recognition. She was no longer running from her past. The scars would remain, but they were proof of survival. The night was no longer her enemy. It was her witness. In the final quiet of the night, Emma walked softly to Daniel's room. She stood at the doorway, hand on the frame, watching him sleep peacefully. His soft breathing filled the silence, a lullaby more healing than any victory. She sat gently beside him, brushing his hair back. A smile curved across her lips, real, unguarded, free. She whispered, "We're stronger now, and we'll never stop fighting." Her voice was steady, not desperate, but sure. The room felt lighter, filled with promise. She kissed his forehead, pulling the blanket higher. The battles had scarred her, but they had also shaped her. Tomorrow would bring new struggles, but tonight she rested in peace. In the stillness, Emma finally let herself believe in a tomorrow worth fighting for.